Welcome to True Echo, where untold stories rise from the dust of forgotten highways and hidden heroism. Today's tale will leave you speechless, as a simple traffic stop turns into a salute heard around the nation. This is not just a story about a taillight, it's a revelation, decades in the making. It began the way most things do, quiet, unassuming, with the desert light folding over the horizon like warm parchment. The air along Highway 191 near Safford, Arizona was still, save for the occasional gust of wind and the low rumble of a motorcycle. Walter Granger's 1962 Triumph Bonneville cut through the silence with a familiar, mellow roar. It wasn't flashy, just reliable. Like him. 78 years old, riding solo, no radio, no phone, just the road and the sound of rubber skimming asphalt. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't swerving. He didn't look lost. The only thing out of place was a dim flicker of the rear taillight, barely hanging on to life. That was enough. The patrol cruiser trailing a few lengths behind took note. The lights flashed red and blue. A low siren chirped once. Walter glanced at his mirror, nodded once to himself, and eased the bike over onto the shoulder. No panic. No rush. Just methodical precision, like he'd rehearsed this movement more times than anyone could count. The cruiser parked behind him. Two officers stepped out, one younger, one older. The older of the two, Officer Brenton, kept a casual hand on his belt. His partner, Officer Leary, was more stiff, suspicious. Maybe it was the badge on the back of Walter's worn leather jacket, a faded, frayed emblem of the 101st Airborne Division. Brenton offered a nod. "Evenin', sir. You mind stepping off for a sec?" Walter turned the key and the Bonneville rumbled down to silence. He took off his helmet, slow and smooth, revealing a weathered face marked by decades in the sun, and something else, a calm that unnerved more than any attitude might have. "Something wrong?" he asked, voice dry like wind through mesquite. "Tail lights out," Brenton replied. "Just figured you might not know." Walter gave a single nod. "Could be. This bike's older than you are." Brenton chuckled. "Wouldn't surprise me." Leary moved toward the back of the bike, inspecting the plates, the military decals, the old duffel strapped behind the seat. "You active duty before?" he asked. Walter kept his gaze forward. "Long time ago." "How long?" Walter didn't blink. "Long enough." Brenton took the ID, retreated to the cruiser. Leary stayed back, awkward, trying to fill the space with talk. "Where you headed?" "Veterans Ride. Couple miles out." Leary looked him over again, like trying to solve a puzzle with too few pieces. "Funny. Don't see too many vets your age riding alone." Walter didn't answer. Back at the cruiser, Brenton pulled up Walter's record. Clean. Spotless. But something pinged, a marker, military-related. Old. Classified tag from another era. Not enough to raise alarms, but enough to raise eyebrows. He picked up the radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Brenton. Badge 4A81. Need verification on a subject. Name's Walter Granger. July 2, 1945. Any federal notes or veteran record tags?" The voice on the other end paused. Keys clicked. "Then, that name's pinging something. Not flagged, but unusual clearance history. Looks like Cold War-era classified ops. I've never seen this tag before, not digital. It's deep, old school." Brenton blinked. "You serious?" The dispatcher's tone sharpened. "You might want to stay with him. Just in case." Brenton returned to Leary. "Let's keep him a few more minutes." Leary nodded. "You think he's dangerous?" Brenton glanced at Walter, who stood calmly, arms folded. "I think we don't know what we're standing next to." Brenton kept his voice measured. "Hey, sir. Appreciate your patience. Just verifying a few things on the system. You mind waiting a little longer? Walter didn't flinch. Not in a rush. Leary cleared his throat. Were you ever with special operations? Walter didn't answer right away. Then, evenly, that's not the kind of thing you forget, officer. Just as the words settled in the air, a faint tremor passed under their boots. Leary shifted his stance. You feel that? Then they saw it, a low dust cloud forming on the southern horizon, creeping fast, thick and unrelenting. Brenton tensed, hand brushing his hip near the holster. What the hell is that? Walter didn't move. Instead, he reached into his jacket and removed a photograph, folding it once in his palm, thumb grazing its edge. They're here, he said. The words barely finished when shapes began to cut through the haze: Humvees, transports, a black SUV that looked military but wasn't marked. The road trembled again under heavy tires and synchronized boots. Leary took an involuntary step back. Is that a convoy? Brenton's pulse spiked. What the? The vehicle skidded to a calculated halt, 3 Humvees up front, then 2 larger transports carrying uniformed soldiers, all of them upright, disciplined, statuesque. The black SUV parked directly behind the cruiser. Silence followed, thick and electric. Then the SUV's door swung open. Out stepped a man in a sharp, desert-pressed uniform. His gait was clean, deliberate. A silver bar gleamed on his chest, Captain. He didn't speak to the officers. He didn't acknowledge the cruiser. He walked straight toward Walter Granger. They locked eyes. Sir, the captain said with reverence. Eli, Walter replied. Brenton blinked. You two know each other. Captain Ramirez turned just slightly, offering the officers a polite but definitive statement. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. We'll take it from here. With respect, Brenton said, someone want to explain what's going on. Ramirez didn't raise his voice. You did your jobs. What you didn't know is that the man you pulled over is the reason I exist. Brenton looked at Leary. Excuse me. Ramirez turned fully to Walter, his tone softening. My father told me the story every year. Laos. 72, you weren't supposed to be there. But you went in anyway. Extracted 24 prisoners. One of them was him, Corporal Julian Ramirez. He said you walked through gunfire like death had to ask permission first. Walter didn't smile. He didn't flinch. I remember the ridge, he said. Your father caught a bullet in the thigh. Told him to crawl or bleed out. Ramirez nodded. He crawled. Then he turned back to the convoy, raising a hand in a sharp signal. The soldiers stepped down, 50 of them, forming a single, pristine line along the shoulder. Not one spoke. Not one moved out of sync. Brenton was speechless. What is this? A salute, Ramirez replied. Walter shifted the helmet under his arm. This isn't necessary, Eli. No, sir, the captain said. It's overdue. One of the younger soldiers stepped forward, carrying a folded American flag. He moved with reverence, no showmanship, no theatrics, just gravity. He stopped in front of Walter and extended the flag with both hands. He requested to carry it himself, Ramirez said softly. Private Lawson. His grandfather was one of the men you pulled out that day. He grew up hearing your name. Walter didn't reach for it at first. Then, slowly, he took it, steady hands, no trembling, and held it to his chest. The silence deepened. Then, in perfect unison, 50 rifles lifted into a formal salute. Not to fire. Not to intimidate. But to honor. And in the center of it all, Walter Granger stood, still, unreadable, yet unmistakably moved. He didn't speak. But his eyes said everything. The desert wind swept over the highway as Walter held the folded flag close to his chest. His stance hadn't changed, but there was a subtle bend at the corners of his mouth, like a weight was pressing from the inside out. For a moment, it wasn't a salute, it was a reckoning. "You never asked for this," Ramirez murmured. Walter didn't respond. "I know," Ramirez said. "But we did." Then, without a word, Walter stepped forward and held the flag out, not to the captain, but back to the young private who had carried it. "Keep it," Walter said, his voice low, but commanding. "You'll understand why one day." The private hesitated, eyes wide. He looked toward Ramirez, who gave the faintest nod. The young man accepted the flag again, his hands trembling slightly as if he held something sacred. Walter turned fully to face Ramirez. "You're Eli. Julian's boy." "Yes, sir," Ramirez said. Walter's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of memory rising in his gaze. He wore boots 2 sizes too small. Never wanted to admit the army issued him the wrong pair. Ramirez laughed, surprised. "He told me that. Said he never complained." "He didn't," Walter said. "Limped for 4 days. Never said a word." Brenton and Leary exchanged a glance. The stiffness in their bodies had given way to reverent awe. They didn't understand the full story, but they knew they were standing inside something important. Then Ramirez gave a quick hand signal. The line of soldiers snapped into formation again. "Company," Ramirez called out. "Present arms." In a single motion, the line raised their weapons in formal salute, and this time, Walter responded. For the first time in decades, his right hand rose to his brow. A slow, precise motion, not out of duty, but out of memory. Private Lawson stood holding the flag like it was stitched from time itself. Brenton stood straighter. Leary lowered his head. Across the road, passing drivers were pulling over, stepping out of their cars in silence, some removing hats, others placing hands on hearts. And then, something no one expected. A voice from across the road, hesitant but clear, "Mr. Granger." Walter turned, his hand falling slowly to his side. A woman in her early 60s was stepping carefully across the pavement. She wore a yellow blouse and held a folded piece of paper in her trembling fingers. "I think you knew my brother," she said. Walter blinked. "Alan Forrester," she continued. "Navy pilot. Shot down in '71. They said he died in the jungle, never found his body." Walter's gaze didn't waver. "They told my father he died alone. We never even got a grave," she said, now standing just in front of him. "But a few years ago, someone from the VA visited my mother. Said a man had stayed behind to mark the site. No name. Just this." She handed Walter the faded paper. On it, in smudged graphite, "Forrester. Position marked. Don't let him vanish." Walter's eyes locked on the note. His jaw clenched. The woman's voice cracked. "That was you?" Walter whispered, "We made a promise. No one gets left behind." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't break. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. And for a man who had carried the weight of 1,000 silent memories, Walter didn't recoil. He let her hold him. The convoy, the salute, the attention, it had all culminated in this. A single moment of connection. A truth returned to someone who'd waited a lifetime. Walter didn't say much as the woman let go. She didn't need him to. Her eyes told the story of a family who finally had something more than a report, more than a line in a file. They had closure. Captain Ramirez gave the order. "Company, attention." The line of soldiers snapped once more into perfect unity. Right face. Boots shifted, crunching gravel with trained precision. Present arms. One final salute. Walter, still standing before them all, responded in kind. His hand raised again, slow and steady, the weight of decades behind it. But this time, he held it a second longer. Private Lawson clutched the folded flag to his chest. He looked like he wanted to say something, but knew it wasn't the time. He stood tall, jaw tight, eyes forward. The convoy was preparing to leave. But Ramirez lingered. He walked back toward Walter with something small in his hand, a sealed tan envelope. Standard military issue. No names. No markings. He held it out. Before we go, this is for you. Walter stared at it for a moment, then slowly took it. He didn't open it. Instead, he slid it into the side pocket of his saddlebag. He said nothing. Brenton stepped forward. Captain, can I ask something? Ramirez turned. Of course. Why today? Why here? Why this way? Ramirez glanced at Walter, then back to the officers. Because he wouldn't come to us. We invited him to D.C. 3 times. He never replied. Walter's gaze didn't shift. We saw his name on a sign-up list for a veterans charity ride. No press. No ceremony. Just engines and silence. That's when we knew, this was the only way he'd let us say thank you. Walter finally spoke. Didn't do it for the gratitude. I know, Ramirez said. But we still owe it. As the soldiers climbed back into their vehicles, a horn sounded from one of the transport trucks. Engines rumbled to life. But before they pulled out, Ramirez leaned in close to Walter one last time. My father told me something before he passed. Walter's eyes met his. He said, if you ever meet Walt, tell him, you didn't just save my life, you gave me everything that came after it. For a long second, Walter didn't move. Then, quietly, your dad ever tell you I almost left him behind? Ramirez looked stunned. No. He was bleeding bad. We were pinned down. I almost walked. Looked at my team. Looked at the map. Hesitated. But you didn't. No, Walter said. But I thought about it. There was a pause. Then Ramirez said, I haven't lived what you did. But I carry my own weight. I try not to let it crush me. Walter nodded slowly. That's good. That's what keeps men upright. Then Ramirez pulled out one final item, something smaller than the envelope, older, worn. A harmonica. You gave this to my dad. Said it kept him sane. He kept it until the day he died. Now, it's yours again. Walter took it in his hands, slow and reverent. He turned it once in his fingers, like touching a memory. He didn't say thank you. He didn't have to. As the convoy began to roll, Ramirez gave a crisp salute, less official, more human. Walter raised the harmonica in response. No words. Just meaning. And then the road was quiet again. The Humvees kicked up a curtain of desert dust as they drove away, the sound of boots, engines, and command dissolving into the wide Arizona silence. Only the cruiser and the bike remained, and the 2 officers who had stumbled into history. Brenton walked toward Walter, face still pale. Sir. I don't think I've ever witnessed anything like that. Walter shrugged, slid the harmonica into his jacket pocket. Neither have I. Leary stepped up beside him, voice softer than it had been all evening. So what now? You still heading to that veterans ride? Walter nodded. Yeah. Someone's got to warn the young ones not to ride on bald tires. Brenton chuckled despite himself. You think they'll listen to you? Nope, Walter said, mounting the Bonneville. But I'll say it anyway. As the motorcycle rumbled back to life, neither officer moved to stop him. The tail light was still broken, but it no longer seemed to matter. Brenton stared after him. You think he was telling the truth about almost leaving that soldier behind? Leary shook his head. Doesn't matter. He didn't. But what they didn't know, what Walter didn't even consider, was that everything had been recorded. The cruiser's dashcam had captured it all, the moment the lights flicked on, the conversation at the roadside, the arrival of the convoy, the flag ceremony, the salutes, the hug with the pilot's sister. Even the harmonica exchange. Back at the station, the overnight desk clerk named Jerry was going through routine reviews. He clicked through footage from multiple cruisers, sipping lukewarm coffee until he paused on one feed, the moment Humvees flooded the screen. He rewound. Hit play. Then paused again. What the hell? He clipped a 47-second portion and uploaded it, not publicly, just to a private Facebook group for regional first responders. The clip was titled, "Salute on Highway 191, Can Anyone Confirm This?" The next morning, it had already leaked. TikTok re-edits with dramatic music. YouTube videos with slow zoom reactions. Twitter threads guessing at Walter's identity. And within 48 hours, someone posted a name. Walter Granger. A vet from Bowie, Arizona. The small-town diner he frequented began getting visitors. People left notes on his usual booth. Paid for his coffee. Stood outside just to see him ride by. Walter didn't change. He still went to the charity ride, parked in the back, took the long way around, avoided questions. But the waitress at the diner, Tess, wasn't having it. "You gonna pretend you didn't go viral?" "I don't know what that means," Walter replied flatly. "It means people are crying in their cars over you on their lunch breaks." He sipped his coffee. "They'll get over it." She dropped an envelope in front of him. "Letter came for you. From the kid with the flag. Lawson." Walter didn't open it. He slid it into his jacket. "Gave him something," he murmured. "What's that?" Tess asked. Walter looked out the window. "Didn't know I needed to." Later that day, while pushing the Bonneville out of the garage, Walter spotted a group of teens standing on the sidewalk. Helmets in hand. Dusty jeans. Grease under their nails. One of them stepped forward. "Mr. Granger, you the guy from the video?" Walter stopped. "You here to ask questions?" The teen shook his head. "No, sir. We were wondering if you ever show people how to fix bikes like that." Walter studied them for a moment. Then said, "I might. If you know how to listen." The next morning, Walter's garage was louder than usual, not with commotion, but with the clinking of tools, the occasional engine sputter, and the murmured sounds of teenagers asking real questions. One had a rusted-out Honda he swore was salvageable. Another had no bike at all, just a notebook filled with diagrams and curiosity. Walter didn't say much. He taught through silence and demonstration. When he did speak, it was sharp, dry, and straight to the point. "Don't put your hand near that belt unless you want to count to 4 from now on." The kids listened. They didn't know what he'd done. Not really. They'd seen the clips, sure, some of them had watched the salute 5 times over. But they didn't care about his past nearly as much as they cared about learning. And that, perhaps, was the greatest honor he'd received yet. By the afternoon, a local teacher dropped off her nephew. A father from Tucson drove up with his teenage daughter, hoping she'd hear something different from Walter than she ever did in school or at home. Walter didn't turn anyone away. He didn't teach them history. He taught them engines, torque, discipline, and patience. And somewhere in that grease-streaked chaos, he gave them something none of them had words for. Legacy. He still wouldn't talk about the war unless someone asked. Even then, it was just bits and pieces, a joke about army-issued boots or how to tape your ribs after falling out of a helicopter without reporting it. But the kids didn't press. They just kept showing up. One evening, Officer Brenton dropped by in plain clothes with a box of donuts and a quiet smile. Walter looked up from his workbench. "That a bribe?" "Not a bribe," Brenton said, sitting on an overturned bucket. "Gratitude. You're a week late. Brenton laughed. Better than never. He watched as one of the boys tried to pry a rusted clutch lever loose. You know, I've seen a lot of people chase attention lately. Flash mobs, fake breakdowns, road rage on camera. Walter didn't look up. But your story? Brenton continued. It's still being shared. Still growing. Walter chewed slowly on a bite of donut. I didn't do anything. You did more than you think. Walter looked at him for a moment. If I'd known that stop would turn into all this, I might have fixed the damn tail light. Brenton chuckled. You think that would have stopped the captain? Walter considered it. Probably not. There was a silence between them. Then Brenton asked, You think we deserve salutes like that? The ceremony? Walter's voice turned quiet. That salute wasn't for me. Brenton frowned. What do you mean? Walter looked around at the kids, the tools, the old Triumph parked nearby. That was for the ones who didn't come home. I just carried their names a little further. Brenton nodded slowly. And now you're passing them on. Walter didn't reply. But he didn't need to. Because sometimes, the loudest message is the one passed through calloused hands and quiet wisdom. The Bonneville rumbled low as Walter pulled onto the long road leading out of town. He wasn't heading to any ceremony, wasn't chasing attention. But today felt different. He rode until the town fell behind him, then slowed at the gates of a small, wind-worn cemetery near Wilcox. No one else was around. The air was still, thick with desert quiet. He dismounted and reached into the saddlebag. In one hand, a small brown paper bag with a single blueberry scone. In the other, the harmonica, now smooth from days of turning it in his palm like a stone he wasn't ready to skip. Walter walked slowly, boots crunching over gravel and sand, until he stopped before a headstone etched with time. Evelyn Granger. Wife. Teacher. Gave everything without asking for credit. He knelt down and placed the bag carefully beside the grave. Didn't bring flowers, he said. You never liked them. Said they were better off growing. He exhaled. I had a strange week, he added. Got pulled over. Tail light gave out. Thought it'd be a quick stop. Then 50 soldiers showed up. Eli Ramirez was with them. Julian's boy. You remember him. He paused, looking at the headstone, eyes softening. He's a captain now. Brought a convoy. Gave me a flag. I gave it back. Walter pulled the harmonica from his pocket, resting it gently on the stone. You never liked me playing this, he said with a quiet chuckle. Said I was always half a note off. But I think I'll leave it with you this time. He stood slowly, knees popping slightly, and adjusted his jacket. I'm not going to D.C. I know you'd say I should, that it's good for others, but I've done my part. Let someone else stand in front of the cameras. He turned to leave. Then stopped. Reached into his jacket again and pulled out the sealed envelope Ramirez had given him. He held it for a long moment. Then, quietly, laid it on the bench beside the grave. Not for me, he murmured. Never was. Let someone else open it. The Bonneville roared to life beneath him, steady and familiar. As he pulled away, he didn't look back. But behind him, beneath that Arizona sky, the harmonica caught the sun. And next to it, that tan envelope waited, unopened, undisturbed, for the next hand that would need it. The next morning, Walter was back at the garage. 3 kids were already there, crouched over busted engines and rusted frames. One had a clutch cable that wouldn't sit. Another tried to tighten a chain with a wrench too big. Walter wiped grease from his palms. First lesson, he said, voice dry. Don't touch anything that smells like it's leaking and burning. That's not ambition. That's stupidity. The kids laughed. More were arriving each day. One by one. A teacher. A dad. A student with shaky hands but sharp eyes. They didn't care about salutes or medals. They wanted to build something. Fix something. Learn something. And Walter gave them space to do it. He didn't teach them about war. Not directly. But he taught them how to endure. How to be exact. How to listen. And most of all, how to care about something enough to make it run again. One day, a reporter called. Wanted to write a feature. Walter said no. Then came another. A talk show. Walter said no again. He wasn't being rude. He just wasn't interested in the kind of fame that faded in 24 hours. He was interested in what stayed. And the shop was full of it now: noise, clanging, oil, progress. He wasn't famous. He was useful. And for a man who had carried the weight of ghosts for 50 years, that was more than enough. There are heroes who ask for medals, and those who carry names in silence. Walter Granger was the kind who never asked for attention, but when it came, he gave it away. As Captain Ramirez once said, he didn't ask for tribute, but we needed to give one. If this story moved you, take a moment to thank someone in your life who's carried more than they let on. Share this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to True Echo, for more stories that remind us what quiet heroism really looks like.